needed the money. That's what it all came down to. When you're 48 years old and watching your wife fight stage 3 breast cancer while your daughter's college tuition bills pile up alongside medical debt that's climbing toward $120,000, you don't ask too many questions about opportunities that seem too good to be true. The engineering firm had let me go 6 months earlier. Workers' compensation claim for my back injury made me non-essential personnel, they said. 22 years of building bridges and skyscrapers, and I was suddenly expendable. So when I spotted that job listing for a maintenance position on a cruise ship offering $12,000 for 2 weeks of work, I didn't hesitate. Jennifer was between chemo sessions, Ashley was home from her freshman year at State, and the mortgage company had started using words like acceleration and foreclosure proceedings in their letters. Our house in Millfield still owed $180,000, and with my disability payments barely covering utilities, we were drowning. The interview was in a small office building downtown. Nothing fancy, just a plain door with Neptune's Crown Cruise Line stenciled on frosted glass. I knocked twice before entering. Theodore Cross sat behind a desk that looked too big for the cramped room. He was tall and thin, with slicked-back silver hair, and the kind of face that reminded me of old photographs, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks. His suit was perfectly black, his tie blood red against a crisp white shirt. "Mr. Patterson," he said, not bothering to stand. His voice was smooth and measured, like he'd rehearsed every word. "Please have a seat." I sat in the chair across from him, feeling underdressed in my navy blue button-up and khakis. My best interview clothes, but they felt shabby under his gaze. The fabric was starting to show wear at the elbows. Couldn't afford new clothes with everything else going on. "Your application was interesting," Cross said, tapping a folder with long, thin fingers. 22 years in structural engineering, followed by facility maintenance work. "You're qualified for the position, certainly." "Thank you, sir," I said, falling back on old habits. "I'm a hard worker, always have been." "I'm sure you are." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But this position has some unique requirements. The Neptune's Crown isn't your typical cruise ship." That should have been my first warning. But when he mentioned the salary again, $12,000 per week, $24,000 total, I just nodded along. That money would cover Jennifer's new treatment protocol and give us breathing room with the mortgage. Maybe even let Ashley stay at State instead of transferring to community college. "The contract outlines everything," Cross continued, sliding a thick document across the desk. "I suggest you read it carefully before signing." I flipped through the pages, skimming it first, then slowing down as I noticed some unusual clauses. My work hours would be from midnight to 6 in the morning. I was to remain invisible to passengers at all times. And there was a specific section about cleaning biological material between 2 and 4 in the morning. "Biological material?" I asked, looking up. Cross's expression didn't change. "A cruise ship is a complex operation, Mr. Patterson. Accidents happen. Kitchen staff cut themselves. Passengers fall. Your job is simply to ensure all evidence of such incidents is thoroughly removed." It made sense, I guess. Sort of. In my construction days, I'd cleaned up after plenty of workplace accidents. Blood wasn't new to me, but then I got to the section about communication. "I'm not allowed to speak to anyone?" I asked. "The passengers pay for a premium experience," Cross explained. "They don't want to see the inner workings of the ship. Think of yourself as invisible, present but unseen, doing your work without disturbing anyone." The contract had other strange stipulations. I couldn't ask questions about the ship's operations. I couldn't enter certain areas without explicit permission. And most importantly, breaking any rule meant immediate termination without pay. I hesitated, pen hovering over the signature line. Jennifer's last MRI had shown the tumors weren't shrinking as much as Dr. Hoffman hoped. We needed the new treatment protocol, but insurance was fighting it. $24,000 would cover that and buy us time to figure out the rest. "Is there a problem, Mr. Patterson?" Cross asked, his gray eyes fixed on mine. I thought about Jennifer's tired smile that morning, how she'd tried to hide her pain when Ashley hugged her goodbye. I thought about the stack of bills on my kitchen table and the nights I'd lain awake calculating how long we could last. My engineering mind was good with numbers, and the numbers didn't lie. Without this job, we'd lose everything within 3 months. "No problem," I said, and signed my name. Cross's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Excellent. A helicopter will pick you up tomorrow morning at 7. Pack light. Uniforms will be provided. Where exactly is the ship located? I asked. Approximately 60 miles offshore, in international waters. The Neptune's crown maintains a permanent position there for our exclusive clientele. That night, I called Jennifer from the hotel Cross had booked for me near the helipad. I told her it was a standard cruise ship maintenance contract, nothing more. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice weaker than it had been a month ago. "Getting back out there, providing for us. Ashley and I will be fine while you're gone." "I love you," I said, meaning it more than I'd ever meant anything. "Love you too. Just come home safe." I promised her I would. At the time, I thought it was a promise I could keep. The next morning, I stood on a helipad at the edge of the city, a small duffel bag at my feet, containing just the essentials: some clothes, toiletries, my phone charger, and a photo of Jennifer and Ashley from Ashley's high school graduation. The helicopter that landed was sleek and black, with no markings except for a small ocean wave symbol on the door. The pilot didn't speak as we lifted off, just handed me a pair of headphones to block the noise. Through the window, I watched the coastline shrink and disappear as we headed out over open water. I tried calling Jennifer, but there was no signal once we got beyond the first few miles. The flight took exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. I know because I kept checking my watch, trying to calculate our speed and distance. My engineering brain wouldn't shut off, even in situations like this. 60 miles offshore, just like Cross had said. That put us well outside any territorial waters, in a legal gray zone where normal rules might not apply. When I spotted the Neptune's crown, it looked like any luxury cruise ship from a distance, white and massive against the blue water. But as we got closer, I noticed differences. No colorful logos or decorations adorned its hull. The ship was pristine white, almost clinical in its cleanliness. The deck areas seemed unusually empty for a vessel that should have been carrying around 200 passengers. Most strange was that it wasn't moving, just sitting there in the middle of the ocean like a floating island, perfectly stationary despite the gentle swells. "How does it stay in position?" I asked the pilot through the headset. He glanced at me, then back at his controls. "Dynamic positioning system. Computer-controlled thrusters keep it locked to GPS coordinates." That made sense from an engineering perspective. Expensive technology, but it would work. Still, the whole setup felt wrong somehow. Cruise ships were supposed to move, to take passengers places. This felt more like a floating prison. We landed on a helipad at the rear of the ship. As soon as I stepped out, the helicopter took off again, leaving me alone on the deck. The air felt heavy and still despite being in the middle of the ocean. There was no sound of waves, no sense of movement. It was like standing on solid ground. "Michael Patterson." I turned to find a thin man with reddish-brown hair watching me. He wore a standard white crew uniform, but it hung loosely on his frame like he'd lost weight recently. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he kept glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out at him. "That's me," I said, extending my hand. He ignored it. "Caleb Morrison, I'm supposed to show you to your cabin." His accent had a slight southern lilt. "Follow me and don't talk to anyone else." As we walked through the ship, Caleb moved quickly, taking service corridors and back stairwells instead of the main passageways. The architecture was impressive, clearly a high-end vessel with polished marble floors and brass fixtures. But something felt off about the layout. Corridors, curved when my engineering instincts said they should be straight. Distances seemed wrong, like the ship was bigger inside than it should be. The few crew members we passed nodded silently or looked away. No one spoke. No casual greetings or workplace banter. In my construction days, job sites were always noisy with conversation and jokes. This felt more like a library or a funeral home. "Your contract?" Caleb said suddenly, his voice low. "You read it all?" "Yes," I answered. "And you signed it anyway?" He shook his head. "Follow it to the letter. Don't break a single rule. Don't talk to passengers. Don't talk to crew. Clean what they tell you to clean when they tell you to clean it." "What about no questions?" He cut me off, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Trust no one, not even me." He stopped at a door marked 327. "Your cabin. Uniforms inside. First shift starts at midnight." Before I could say anything else, he hurried away, leaving me alone in the narrow corridor. My cabin was small but functional. A bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom. The closet held 5 identical uniforms, black pants and gray shirts with "maintenance" embroidered on the chest. No name tag, no ship logo, nothing to identify me. The fabric was good quality, better than anything I'd worn to work in years. I spent the rest of the day exploring the ship, careful to stay in crew areas and service quarters. The Neptune's crown was massive. 15 decks according to the directory, multiple restaurants, pools, a casino, and a grand ballroom. My engineering eye automatically cataloged the structure. The ship had to be at least 800 feet long, probably closer to 900. That was huge, even for a luxury vessel. But something felt wrong about the whole place. The lighting seemed too dim in some areas, too bright in others. The air circulation system hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. And there were too many corridors that led nowhere, too many doors that were locked without explanation. Around 6 in the evening, I ventured into passenger areas, keeping my head down and trying to look like I belonged. The passengers themselves were strange. They moved with an odd grace, almost gliding across the polished floors. They spoke to each other in languages I couldn't identify, their voices rising and falling in unusual patterns that reminded me of chanting. Most disturbing was how none of them seemed to notice me at all. Their eyes would slide past me as if I wasn't there, like I was part of the furniture. I'd worked maintenance before and knew what it felt like to be invisible to the people paying the bills. But this was different. This felt supernatural. I returned to my cabin before dinner, not wanting to risk breaking any rules on my first day. I tried calling Jennifer again, but still no signal. The isolation was already getting to me, and I'd only been aboard for a few hours. I managed to sleep for a couple hours, setting an alarm for 11:30, but my dreams were filled with endless corridors and passengers with blank faces. At 11:45, I put on my uniform and gathered the cleaning supplies that had been left in my room. The equipment was professional grade: mops, buckets, disinfectants, and several bottles of industrial-strength cleaner, specifically labeled for biological material removal. The labels were more detailed than I expected, with warnings about proper ventilation and protective equipment. This wasn't standard janitorial stuff. The ship was different at night. The corridors seemed longer, the shadows deeper. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow that made the polished surfaces look like they were covered in blood. I moved through the empty passageways with my cleaning cart, checking the schedule I'd been given. Regular maintenance for the first 2 hours, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash. Nothing unusual there. I'd done similar work during slow periods at construction sites. But as 2 o'clock approached, I felt my heart rate picking up. According to my contract, this was when I'd need to clean biological material. But where? The schedule didn't specify. I just had to wait for instructions. I stood in a service corridor on the main deck, watching the minutes tick by on my watch. My engineering mind kept analyzing the ship's construction. The sound dampening was excellent. Too good, maybe. I couldn't hear any of the normal noises you'd expect on a vessel this size. No engine vibration, no water pumps, no air circulation fans. Just silence. 2 o'clock came and went. Nothing happened. No biological material, no instructions, just that oppressive quiet that made every small sound echo too loudly. Then at 2:15, my radio crackled to life. "Maintenance," said a voice I didn't recognize. Smooth, professional, but with something underneath that made my skin crawl. "Report to the main deck, starboard side, section 4. Cleaning required." I took a deep breath and pushed my cart forward, heading toward whatever waited for me in the darkness. When I rounded the corner to section 4, I stopped cold. There it was, a puddle of blood about the size of a dinner plate, glistening under the dim deck lights. Fresh, wet, red, still liquid, which meant it hadn't been there long. "What the hell?" I muttered, looking around. The deck was empty. No injured passengers, no signs of a struggle, no trail leading to or from the stain. Just this perfect circle of blood sitting there like someone had carefully poured it. I cleaned plenty of messes in my construction days. Job sites saw their share of accidents. I knew what blood looked like when someone got hurt, how it spread based on the severity of the wound and the height of the fall. This didn't match any pattern I'd seen before. It was too neat, too geometric. Blood doesn't naturally form perfect circles. But I had a job to do, and my family needed that money. I pulled on my rubber gloves and got to work, following the cleaning protocol exactly as outlined in my contract. First, the absorbent powder to soak up the liquid, then the specialized cleaner that broke down the proteins. The blood disappeared like it had never been there, leaving the deck spotless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. In my engineering career, I'd learned to trust my instincts about when things didn't add up. This definitely didn't add up. By the time I finished my first shift and crawled into bed, I was exhausted, but couldn't sleep. That bloodstain kept playing in my mind. Too perfect, too deliberate. The engineering part of my brain kept trying to work out the physics. How does blood end up in a perfect circle with no source? Night 2 started normally enough. I worked through my regular cleaning duties, getting familiar with the ship's layout. The Neptune's crown was a marvel of engineering, I had to admit. The structural design was flawless, the materials top quality. Whoever built this vessel had spared no expense. But there were things that bothered me from a technical standpoint. Corridors that were longer than the ship's outer dimensions should allow. Stairwells that seemed to go up more floors than actually existed. Weight distribution that should have made the vessel list to one side, but somehow didn't. At 2:15, the radio crackled again. Maintenance to passenger deck, port side, hallway B. I found another bloodstain there, but this one was different. A long smear that ran along the baseboard for about 6 feet. Again, no source. No trail leading to or from it. Just blood where blood shouldn't be. As I cleaned it, I noticed something that made me pause. The smear continued up the wall. Not just a splash from impact. It literally went straight up, defying gravity, climbing about 4 feet before stopping abruptly. My engineering mind rebelled against what I was seeing. That's not possible, I whispered to myself, staring at it. Blood doesn't flow upward. It follows the laws of physics, creates splash patterns based on velocity and impact angle. Surface tension, gravity, fluid dynamics, all of it was being violated by what I was looking at. 22 years of understanding how things work, and this made no sense. I cleaned it anyway, trying to convince myself there was some logical explanation. Maybe someone had smeared it there deliberately. Had to be. But then I found more. A perfect handprint on the ceiling of the ballroom. Droplets that formed a circle around a dining table. A thin line that ran up one wall, across the ceiling, and down the opposite wall. Like someone bleeding had walked that impossible path. None of it made sense, according to everything I knew about structural engineering and physics. Blood doesn't make perfect geometric patterns, doesn't flow against gravity, and there was so much of it, more than a person could lose and still walk away. Yet there was never any sign of where it came from or who might have been injured. I kept cleaning, kept following the rules. What else could I do? I needed that money. Jennifer's treatment depended on it. The third night was when the whispering started. I was cleaning a particularly nasty stain in a crew corridor when the ship's intercom system crackled to life. At first, I thought it was just static, but then I heard it, a voice barely audible, like someone speaking from very far away. Michael. I froze, rag in hand, looking up at the nearest speaker. The voice was cultured, educated, with the kind of accent that spoke of old money and private schools. Michael Patterson, good work. My heart pounded against my ribs. How did they know my name? And who was they, anyway? I'd read the crew manifest posted near the staff lounge, and there were only 28 names listed, including mine. I'd seen maybe half that many people since boarding. The captain is watching. The intercom went silent. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for more, but nothing came. Hello? I called out, immediately regretting breaking the no-speaking rule. My voice echoed down the empty corridor. No response. I hurried through the rest of my shift, constantly looking over my shoulder. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I searched for cameras, for any sign of surveillance equipment, but found nothing obvious. Just the occasional intercom speaker, mounted high on the walls. Back in my cabin, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to make sense of it all. In 3 days, I hadn't seen anyone who looked like they were in charge of this floating nightmare. The crew members I'd encountered seemed as lost as I was, and now half of them had seemingly vanished. I tried calling Jennifer again, but still no signal. The isolation was eating at me. At home, even during the worst of her treatments, I could hold her hand, could feel connected to something real. Here, I was completely alone with whatever was happening on this ship. By the fourth night, things got even stranger. I was cleaning a stain near the grand staircase when I heard footsteps. Lots of them, moving in perfect unison. I ducked behind a decorative column and watched as a group of about 15 passengers descended the stairs. They moved in perfect sync, like dancers in a choreographed tuxedos, the women in formal gowns that looked like they belonged in a different era. But something about their faces seemed wrong. Blank, expressionless. Their eyes were open, but seemed to see nothing. They gathered in a circle in the main foyer and began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. Low, rhythmic sounds that made my skin crawl and my back teeth ache. I couldn't make out individual words, but the tone was unmistakable, reverent, almost worshipful. From my engineering background, I'd worked on projects near old churches and synagogues, had heard plenty of religious ceremonies. This was different. This felt ancient, predatory, wrong in a way that bypassed rational thought and went straight to some primitive part of my brain that knew when to run. I stayed hidden, barely breathing, until they finished whatever ritual they were performing and dispersed. They filed out through different exits, still moving with that unnatural synchronization, still wearing those blank expressions. After they left, I found a bloodstain exactly where they had gathered, a perfect circle about 8 feet in diameter, with strange symbols inside it that I didn't recognize. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change if I looked at them too long, like optical illusions designed to hurt your brain. The radio crackled. "Clean it." That was all it said. 2 words in that same cultured voice. I did as I was told, erasing all evidence of whatever had happened there. But as I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about those symbols. In my construction days, I'd seen a lot of architectural details, religious iconography, decorative elements from cultures around the world. These were different. They felt older, more fundamental. Like they represented something that existed before humans developed written language. Later that night, I found blood in places that defied explanation, even by my engineering standards. A perfect spiral pattern on the ceiling of the ship's library, as precise as if it had been drawn with a compass. Droplets floating in the water of the swimming pool without dissolving or dispersing. A trail that went up the outside of the ship's smokestack that I had to clean while clinging to a maintenance ladder in the dark. The intercom whispered to me 3 more times that night. "Good work, Michael. The captain appreciates thoroughness. The passengers have noticed you." That last one sent a chill through me. Being noticed by whatever these passengers were didn't seem like a good thing. In my construction days, I'd learned that being invisible was often the safest option. Foremen who noticed you usually meant problems. As I finished my shift, I found myself counting the days left on my contract. 10 more nights. I could make it. I had to make it. The money was too important. Jennifer's treatment, Ashley's education, keeping our house. Everything depended on me completing this job. I was halfway through my 5th night aboard the Neptune's Crown when I spotted him. Another maintenance worker pushing a cart identical to mine down the long corridor of the passenger deck. I've been told I was the only night cleaner, so seeing Caleb came as a shock. His uniform looked more worn than mine. The fabric faded from what I guessed were countless washings. The man himself looked haggard, thinner than when I'd first met him, with deeper shadows under his eyes. I hesitated, unsure whether to approach or pretend I hadn't seen him. The contract was clear about avoiding interaction, but curiosity got the better of me. I'd been cleaning impossible blood, patterns for 4 nights straight with no explanation. Maybe Caleb had answers. I pushed my cart toward him, trying to look casual. As I got closer, I noticed he had developed a slight limp, favoring his right leg. He glanced up, saw me coming, and froze. For a second, I thought he might bolt, but instead, he quickly looked both ways down the corridor before wheeling his cart to meet mine. "You're still here," he said in a gravelly voice, keeping his volume just above a whisper. He seemed genuinely surprised to see me. I nodded. 5 nights down. "Jesus." He shook his head. "Listen, we're not supposed to talk. It's against the rules, but I had to warn you." "Warn me about what?" I asked, matching his hushed tone. Caleb's face was tense. Deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there when I'd first met him. "This ship, it's not what you think it is. None of this is what they told you." "What do you mean?" "The blood we clean, you've noticed it's not normal, right? The patterns, the places it shows up." His voice had an urgent quality that sent a chill down my spine. "Yeah," I admitted. "I've been finding it in impossible places. Up walls, across ceilings. It violates basic physics." "Exactly," Caleb nodded vigorously. "Because it's not from accidents. It's not from people getting hurt in normal ways." "Then what?" "It's from them," he whispered. glancing nervously toward the passenger decks. The passengers, they're not what they appear to be. The rituals, the ceremonies, the things they do in the dark. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he looked over my shoulder. The color drained from his face. "Oh God," he whispered. "It's watching." Before I could ask what he meant, Caleb abandoned his cart and took off down the corridor, his limp more pronounced as he ran. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the walls, growing fainter as he disappeared around a corner. I spun around, expecting to see something. A passenger, maybe, or cross, or whatever had terrified Caleb so badly. But there was nothing there. Just an empty hallway stretching into darkness, lined with the same polished brass fixtures and marble walls. I stood alone with 2 cleaning carts, listening to the silence that followed. No sound of Caleb's retreat, no indication of what had frightened him. Just the low hum of the ship's systems and my own rapid heartbeat. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Maintenance, report to the main dining room. Cleaning required." I hesitated, looking down the corridor where Caleb had disappeared. Part of me wanted to follow him, to find out what he'd been trying to tell me about the passengers and their rituals. But the contract was clear. Follow instructions. Clean when and where directed. I left Caleb's cart where it was and headed for the dining room. The next night, I kept an eye out for Caleb, hoping to finish our conversation, but he was nowhere to be found. I checked all the passenger decks, the ballroom, even risked a quick peek into the crew quarters. No sign of him. His cart was gone too. When I asked the few crew members I encountered, they looked at me blankly, as if they'd never heard the name Caleb Morrison. One even suggested I might have imagined the whole thing, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd heard. Around 2 in the morning, my radio buzzed. "Maintenance, report to passenger deck, port side, hallway C." When I arrived, I nearly dropped my supplies. An enormous bloodstain spread across the floor and up the wall, exactly where Caleb had stood when we talked. The stain was massive, at least 6 feet in diameter, with splatter patterns extending in all directions. I stared at it, my stomach churning. This was more blood than a single person could lose and survive. In my construction days, I'd seen industrial accidents, knew what massive blood loss looked like. Chainsaw mishaps, falls from height, equipment malfunctions that turned men into statistics. This was worse than any of those. "Maintenance, please proceed with cleanup protocol," the radio voice reminded me. My hands shook as I sprinkled the absorbent powder over the stain. I've been cleaning blood for 5 nights now, but this felt different. This wasn't just mysterious blood in strange patterns. This was Caleb's blood. It had to be. I scrubbed mechanically, trying not to think about what might have happened to him. Had he broken too many rules? Was talking to me the final straw? Or was it something else? Something related to what he'd been trying to warn me about? The blood came up easily, almost too easily. Within an hour, the area was spotless. No evidence remained of the massive stain. No evidence remained of Caleb Morrison. By the time I finished, the area looked like nothing had ever happened there. But I couldn't forget the terror in his eyes when he'd looked over my shoulder. Whatever he'd seen, whatever had made him run, it was still out there. On my 7th night aboard the Neptune's Crown, I returned to my cabin after my shift to find something on my pillow, a folded piece of paper. I picked it up carefully and opened it. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic, written in what looked like red ink. "Mr. Patterson, I've been watching your work with great interest. You follow instructions precisely, you clean thoroughly, you ask no questions. These qualities are rare and valuable aboard my vessel. Others before you have failed to understand the importance of rules. They became curious. They spoke when they should have remained silent. They looked where they should not have looked. Those who follow rules survive. Those who break rules disappear. It's quite simple, really. The passengers have noticed you. This is both an honor and a danger. Continue your excellent work, and you may yet complete your contract." The captain. I read the note 3 times before setting it down. The captain. I'd heard the "I will you" voice on the intercom mention him, but I'd never seen anyone who looked like they might be in charge of the ship. For all I knew, the captain was just another voice in the walls, another part of whatever system was watching me. The next morning, I tried to find other crew members to ask about the captain, but the ship seemed even more empty than before. The few people I'd seen during my first days had vanished, just like Caleb. It was like the Neptune's crown was slowly consuming its own crew, leaving only the essential minimum to keep the vessel operational. When I checked the crew quarters again, I found more evidence of recent departures. Personal belongings still in rooms, but no people. Toothbrushes in bathrooms, clothes in closets, even half-eaten meals in some of the cabins. As if everyone had simply stepped out for a moment and expected to come right back. That night, the intercom whispered to me more frequently than ever before. "Michael Patterson," it said, as I cleaned a small puddle of blood near the library. "Your work pleases the captain." An hour later, as I scrubbed blood from a bathroom mirror. "The passengers have taken an interest in you, Michael Patterson. They rarely notice the maintenance staff." And later still, as I worked on removing blood from around a porthole. "Being noticed is both an honor and a danger, Michael Patterson. The passengers are particular about who catches their attention." I tried to ignore the voice, focusing instead on my cleaning. But it was getting harder to pretend that what I was experiencing was normal. The blood patterns had become increasingly bizarre. That night, I followed one trail that started on the floor of the grand staircase, ran up the wall, across the ceiling in a perfect spiral, and then down the opposite wall to end in a handprint that was definitely not human. The fingers were too long, the palm too narrow, and there were 6 fingers, not 5. Each digit ended in what looked like a claw mark, as if whatever made the print had nails sharp enough to score the polished wood. As I cleaned the final handprint, I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck, as if someone was standing right behind me, breathing on my skin. I turned quickly, but again, there was nothing there. Just empty space and the endless creaking darkness of the Neptune's crown. I couldn't sleep anymore. Not after what I'd seen the past week. The blood patterns, the strange messages, Caleb's disappearance. It was all getting to me. But I had to keep going. 7 more nights, and I'd have enough money to pay for Jennifer's new treatment protocol. 7 more nights, and I could go home to my family. I tried calling Jennifer again, but still no signal. The isolation was eating at me more than the horror. At home, even during the worst of her treatments, I could hold her hand, could feel connected to something real and good. Here, I was completely alone with whatever was happening on this ship. I checked my watch. 12:15. The morning. My shift had started 15 minutes ago, but I hadn't received any radio instructions yet. Usually, the first call came by 12:30. As I pushed my cleaning cart past the grand staircase, I heard something. Music, faint but unmistakable, coming from the main ballroom. According to the schedule I'd been given, there weren't supposed to be any events after 10 at night. The ship's entertainment program was strictly regulated, with all passenger activities ending by a reasonable hour. I hesitated. The contract was clear about avoiding passengers, but my curiosity and my engineering instinct to understand how things worked got the better of me. If I could figure out what was really happening on the ship, maybe I could protect myself better. I left my cart in the hallway and crept toward the ballroom doors, which were slightly ajar. I positioned myself where I could see inside without being noticed, using a decorative column for cover. What I saw made my blood run cold. About 30 passengers stood in a perfect circle in the center of the ballroom. They wore evening clothes, the men in black tuxedos, the women in formal gowns that looked like they belonged to a different era. Victorian, maybe, or Edwardian. But something about their faces seemed wrong. Blank, expressionless. Their eyes were open, but seemed to see nothing, like sleepwalkers going through the motions of being awake. The music I'd heard wasn't coming from any visible source. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a low, thrumming melody that made my teeth ache and my vision blur slightly around the edges. In the center of their circle was a dark stain on the polished wood floor. Blood. Fresh blood that glistened under the chandelier light, still wet enough to reflect the crystal fixtures above. The passengers began to move in unison, taking one step to the left and one to the right. Their movements were mechanical, synchronized in a way that violated everything I understood about human behavior. It was like watching a group of marionettes controlled by the same puppeteer, their limbs moving in perfect coordination without any visible communication between them. Then they started chanting, not in English or any language I recognized. The words sounded ancient, guttural, with the rhythms that made my skin crawl and my engineering mind rebel against what it was hearing. The sounds had a mathematical precision to them, like a formula being recited, but the meaning was completely alien. From my construction background, I'd worked on projects near old churches and synagogues, had heard plenty of religious ceremonies. This was different. This felt older than any human religion. Predatory in a way that bypassed rational thought and went straight to some primitive part of my brain that knew when to run. One woman stepped into the center of the circle. She was tall and elegant, wearing a black gown that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She knelt beside the ITI bloodstain and dipped her fingers into it, then stood and began drawing symbols on the foreheads of the other passengers, one by one. The symbols looked like nothing I'd ever seen before in my engineering career. Curved lines and sharp angles that seemed to shift and change if I looked at them too long, like optical illusions designed to hurt your brain. They reminded me of architectural blueprints, but for structures that couldn't exist in normal space, angles that bent inward on themselves, lines that seemed to go up and down simultaneously. I wanted to leave, to run back to my cabin and lock the door, but I couldn't move. It was like watching a car crash, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Part of me needed to understand what I was seeing, to apply some kind of rational framework to the impossible. The ritual went on for almost an hour. I stayed hidden behind the column, barely breathing, my legs cramping from staying motionless so long. Finally, the passengers stopped chanting and filed out of the ballroom through a side door I hadn't noticed before. They moved in a single line, still perfectly synchronized, still wearing those blank expressions. When they were gone, I waited 5 more minutes before entering the ballroom. The bloodstain in the center of the floor was larger now, almost the size of a dining table. But that wasn't what made me stop cold. Mixed in with the fresh blood were other things: hair, teeth, what looked like fragments of bone. And in one corner of the expanded stain, a piece of fabric that looked disturbingly familiar. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Cleaning required in the main ballroom, biological removal protocol. Copy that, I replied, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. I went back for my cart and got to work. The blood was different this time, thicker, fresher, and there was more of it than I'd ever had to clean before. It took me almost 2 hours to get it all up, and the industrial strength cleaners barely seemed to touch it at first. As I was finishing, I noticed something at the edge of where the stain had been. Another handprint in blood, but this one wasn't the 6-fingered print I'd seen before. This one was smaller, more delicate, human-sized, and I recognized it. It was the same size as Jennifer's hand, the same slender fingers, the same narrow palm, even what looked like her wedding ring impression, a perfect circle that matched the band I'd put on her finger 20 years ago. I quickly cleaned it up, pretending I hadn't noticed anything unusual, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the mop. The intercom crackled again. "Excellent work, Michael. The captain is very pleased." "How do you know my wife's handprint?" I whispered to the empty ballroom. Silence. "How do you know about Jennifer?" More silence. Then, just as I was about to give up, "We know everything about you, Michael Patterson. We know about the drinking after your construction accident. We know about the fight you had with Jennifer before Ashley left for college. We know why you really need this job so badly." I felt the blood drain from my face. The drinking had been a problem for about 6 months after I hurt my back. Jennifer had threatened to leave if I didn't get help. And the fight. We'd argued about money, about Ashley's future, about my inability to provide for them the way I used to. Nobody knew about that except us. "We know why you left your last job, too," the voice continued. "The safety violation you covered up, the inspection report you falsified. Not your fault that man died, of course, but the guilt still keeps you up at night, doesn't it?" I slammed the mop into the bucket, splashing bloody water onto the floor. "Shut up," I hissed. "Jennifer's oncologist called yesterday. The tumors aren't responding as well as hoped. She'll need the new protocol sooner than expected. $35,000, Michael. Can you afford that without this job?" I dropped the mop entirely. "Shut up!" The intercom went silent, but I could still feel eyes on me. Watching. Always watching. Analyzing every weakness, every failure, every moment of shame I tried to forget. I had 5 more nights to go. 5 more nights, and I could return home with enough money to save Jennifer's life. But with each passing hour, I became more certain that I wasn't cleaning up after accidents. I was cleaning cleaning up after something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with the human world I thought I understood. The next night was worse. The bloodstains were appearing everywhere, on ceilings in perfect geometric patterns, on walls, even in places I couldn't reach without a ladder. Some of them looked like they had been painted with brushes, applied with deliberate artistic intention. Others like they had been splashed by something violent and massive. And always, there were those handprints mixed in with the rest. Sometimes the six-fingered ones with their claw-like impressions. Sometimes smaller, human ones that looked too much like my family's. I found one that matched Ashley's hand exactly, down to the small scar on her index finger from when she'd cut herself making dinner freshman year of high school. "You're doing excellent work, Michael," the intercom voice said during my 9th night. "The captain is very pleased." I didn't respond. I never did any more when the voice spoke to me. It knew too much, said things no one should know. "The passengers have noticed your dedication. They appreciate cleanliness." I scrubbed harder at the bloodstain I was working on, trying to ignore the voice. But it was getting harder to focus on the work. Every pattern I cleaned revealed more impossible physics, more violations of everything I'd learned in my engineering career. "Not many cleaners last this long, Michael. You should be proud." That made me pause. Not many cleaners. How many had there been before me? What had happened to them? Thought about Caleb Morrison, how he disappeared after trying to warn me. I hadn't seen him since that night. Hadn't seen any sign that he'd ever existed except for that massive bloodstain where we'd talked. Come to think of it, I was seeing fewer crew members altogether. When I'd first arrived, I'd occasionally pass someone in the hallways, maintenance workers, kitchen staff heading to early morning prep. Now, I rarely saw anyone. The ship felt more empty with each passing night, like it was slowly consuming everyone aboard except the passengers and whatever controlled them. "Your family would be proud too," the voice continued. "Jennifer, fighting so bravely. Ashley, working so hard at school. They need you to succeed here." I dropped my mop, splashing bloody water onto the floor. "Shut up," I hissed. "Jennifer's medical bills are mounting faster than expected. Even with your $24,000, you'll still be short. But we could arrange for additional compensation. The captain values loyalty." I said, "Shut up." Think about it, Michael. Your construction career is over. No one will hire a man with your back injury and your history. This could be a permanent solution to your problems, a way to provide for your family forever. The intercom went silent, but the damage was done. The voice was right, and I knew it. My construction days were behind me. Even if I could find work, it would be minimum wage jobs that wouldn't cover Jennifer's treatment or Ashley's education. This nightmare ship might be the only real opportunity I had left. I picked up the mop and continued cleaning, but my hands were shaking. I've been trying not to think about what would happen after I left the Neptune's crown, focusing only on getting through these 2 weeks. But the reality was that even $24,000 wouldn't solve our problems. It would just buy us time. The next morning during my off hours, I decided to check the crew quarters one more time. I wanted to count how many people were actually left on the ship, to get some sense of whether I was imagining the disappearances or if something was really happening to the staff. The crew section was eerily quiet. I knocked on several doors, but no one answered. Most of the doors were unlocked, so I looked inside. The cabins were empty, but personal belongings were still there. Clothes in closets, photos on nightstands, even half-empty coffee cups. It was like everyone had just stepped out for a minute and expected to come right back. I found a maintenance schedule posted near the staff lounge. According to the roster, there should have been 12 people working the night shift in various capacities. I'd seen maybe 3 of those people during my time aboard, and now even those were gone. I checked the crew manifest again. 28 names were listed, including mine. I started going through the list systematically, checking each cabin. By the time I finished, I'd found evidence of only 5 people still being aboard the ship, personal items that looked recently used, beds that had been slept in within the last day or 2. 28 crew members reduced to 5, and I was apparently one of the survivors. That night, I tried counting the passengers. I positioned myself near the main dining room during the late dinner service and counted as they entered. 63 passengers. But according to the ship's capacity information I'd seen posted, the Neptune's crown only accommodated 50 passengers for its exclusive cruising experience. The next night, I counted again. 78 passengers. The The night after that, 92. The numbers didn't make sense. The ship wasn't that big. Where were all these people coming from? And why do they all have that same blank expression, that same synchronized way of moving? I started marking time until my contract ended. Just 3 more nights, 72 more hours of cleaning blood and pretending I didn't see impossible things. I thought about breaking contract, about finding a way off the ship. We hadn't docked anywhere since I'd arrived, but there had to be lifeboats, emergency procedures. But then I remembered my mortgage, the foreclosure notices, the reason I'd taken this job in the first place. $24,000 for 2 weeks of work. I needed that money. Besides, I'd followed all the rules perfectly so far. I cleaned when told to clean. I stayed invisible to the passengers, or tried to anyway. I never asked questions about the ship or its operations. Maybe that's why I was still here while others had disappeared. Maybe following the rules was keeping me alive. So I kept my head down and did my job. I cleaned blood from places blood shouldn't be. I ignored the inhuman handprints and the increasing number of passengers. I pretended not to notice when the intercom voice started describing my childhood home in perfect detail. 3 more nights. I could survive 3 more nights, couldn't I? I woke up on my 12th day to something wet on my face. Half asleep, I reached up and wiped at my cheek, then froze when my fingers came away red. I sat bolt upright in bed, fully awake now, and stared at the small smear of blood on my fingertips. "What the hell?" I muttered, looking around my cabin. There were 3 small drops of blood on my pillow where my face had been. I checked my nose, my gums, even felt around my scalp for a cut, but couldn't find any source. The blood wasn't mine. I got up and grabbed my cleaning supplies. After 11 nights on the ship, cleaning mysterious blood had become routine. But finding it in my own cabin was new and disturbing. I cleaned the drops from my pillow, then checked the rest of the small cabin. Nothing else seemed out of place until I went into the bathroom and found another drop on the sink. I cleaned that too, trying to ignore the cold feeling spreading through my gut. I've been cleaning blood from all over the ship for days now, but this felt different, personal, like whatever was happening on the Neptune's crown was now targeting me directly. The next night was worse. I came back from my cleaning shift at 6 in the morning to find a puddle of blood on the floor beside my bed. It was about the size of a dinner plate, just like the first stain I'd found on the ship. I cleaned it up, then checked the rest of the cabin more thoroughly. That's when I noticed the smear on the bathroom mirror. It wasn't random. It looked like someone had deliberately drawn a line across it with a bloody finger. I quickly wiped it away, not wanting to think about what it might mean or who might have been in my cabin while I was working. The third night, I came back to find my bedsheet soaked with blood. The mattress underneath was stained too. It took me almost an hour to clean everything, and I ended up having to flip the mattress over. I was exhausted, but too freaked out to sleep. How was someone getting into my cabin? The door had a lock, and I'd been checking it religiously. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication that anyone had been there except for the blood. On the 4th night, I found words written in blood on the wall above my bed. "We see you, Michael." I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. I backed out of the cabin and went to get my cleaning supplies. When I returned 5 minutes later, the message was gone. The wall was completely clean, like nothing had been there at all. I touched the wall where the words had been. It was dry, no trace of blood, no sign that anything had been written there. I was starting to wonder if I was losing my mind. The isolation, the stress, the impossible things I'd been witnessing. Maybe it was all catching up with me. Maybe my brain was creating explanations for things that couldn't be explained. That night, as I was cleaning a particularly nasty blood spill in the ship's library, the intercom crackled to life. "You're doing well, Michael Patterson," the voice said. It was the same voice I'd been hearing for days now, smooth, almost pleasant, but with something wrong underneath. "Better than most." I froze, mop in hand. I'd stopped responding to the voice days ago, but this felt different, more direct, more personal. "Did you know your father doubted you would amount to anything?" The voice continued. My father had died when I was 26, shortly after I'd started my engineering career. We'd never had a good relationship. One of the last things he'd said to me was that I'd never make anything of myself, that I was too soft for construction work. "How do you know about my father?" I asked the empty room. We know everything about you, Michael. We know about the night Jennifer almost left you. We know about Ashley's eating disorder freshman year. We know about the construction worker who died because you approved faulty blueprints. I slammed the mop into the bucket, splashing bloody water onto the floor. Shut up, I hissed. The intercom went silent, but I could still feel eyes on me. Watching, always watching. Analyzing every weakness, every failure, every moment of shame I tried to forget. After that, I decided to change my routine. The contract said I had to work from midnight to 6 in the morning, but it didn't say anything about when I had to sleep. So I started sleeping during the day, from about 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Then I'd spend the evening hours exploring the ship, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I started my final night on the Neptune's crown, the same as all the others. Midnight rolled around, and I grabbed my cleaning cart from the supply closet, checking to make sure I had everything I needed. Just one more night. Just get through these 6 hours, and I'd be done with this nightmare ship for good. The corridors were quiet as I pushed my cart along. I'd gotten used to the dim lighting, the way shadows seemed to stretch too far in certain corners. My routine was down to a science now. Start with the lower passenger decks, work my way up to the main deck, then finish with any special requests that came through the radio. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got the usual radio call directing me to clean up a blood spill in one of the passenger corridors. Nothing unusual there, just a small puddle that I quickly took care of with a specialized cleaner and absorbent powder. I was getting faster at it, which gave me a weird sense of pride that immediately made me feel sick. By 3:15, I'd finished most of my assigned areas and was working on the starboard deck. The night air was cool, and I could hear the gentle slap of waves against the hull below. The sky was clear, stars scattered across the darkness like someone had flicked a paintbrush loaded with white paint. It was almost peaceful, and for a moment I let myself believe I might actually make it through this final night without incident. That's when the intercom crackled to life. Michael Patterson. The voice was the same as always. That smooth, cultured tone that somehow managed to sound both polite and threatening. You've done exceptional work these past 2 weeks. I kept mopping, trying to ignore it. I'd learned that engaging only made things worse. The captain has been watching you closely, as have our passengers. They've taken quite an interest in you, Michael. I gripped the mop handle tighter, focusing on a stubborn spot on the deck. In fact, there's someone aboard who would very much like you to stay with us, permanently. My hands froze. Stay permanently. The contract was for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of hell that I'd endured only because of the money and Jennifer's need for treatment. The thought of staying here forever made my stomach turn. Your contract ends at 6 this morning, but we're prepared to offer you a position as a permanent member of our crew. $35,000 per month, Michael. Think of what that could mean. For your family. I was about to tell the voice exactly what I thought of that offer when I heard it. Footsteps coming from behind me. Not the normal footsteps of someone walking along the deck, but something different, something wrong. They were too synchronized, too deliberate. I turned around slowly, my heart already picking up speed. A group of passengers was moving toward me from the far end of the deck. There were maybe 15 of them, walking in perfect unison, their movements mechanical and precise. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Their eyes caught the ship's lights and reflected them back like animals in headlights. Bright, unnatural pinpoints of light in the darkness. And their mouths. Christ, their mouths were stretched open, far wider than any human mouth should be able to open, revealing rows of teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. They weren't running, but they were moving fast, covering ground with that strange, synchronized gait. And they were coming straight for me. In that moment, I made a decision. Screw the contract, screw the rules about staying invisible and always completing my cleaning duties. I wasn't going to die on the ship. Jennifer and Ashley needed me to come home. I dropped the mop and ran. The deck door was about 20 yards away. I sprinted for it, hearing the footsteps behind me pick up pace. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel them getting closer. Could almost sense those wide, impossible mouths at my back. I hit the door at full speed, yanking it open and practically falling through. I slammed it shut behind me and took off down the corridor, my footsteps echoing loudly in the enclosed space. The door behind me burst open with a bang that made me jump. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. footsteps thundering in unison like some kind of military drill team from hell. Eventually, I found a supply closet and hid inside, pressing myself against the back wall among the shelves of cleaning products. I stayed there until my watch showed 6 o'clock, the official end of my contract. When Theodore Cross came to my cabin that morning, he looked exactly the same as when I'd first met him. Perfect black suit, blood red tie. "Congratulations, Michael. You've successfully completed your contract." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $30,000, $6,000 more than promised. Consider it a bonus for exceptional performance under difficult circumstances. The helicopter ride back felt like waking up from a nightmare. I called Jennifer as soon as I got cell service. "Michael, oh God, I've been so worried. How did it go?" "It's done," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I'm coming home, and we have the money for your treatment." The check cleared immediately. I paid for Jennifer's new treatment protocol that same day. For a few weeks, things were good. Jennifer responded better to the new treatment than we'd hoped. Ashley finished her freshman year with good grades. Then the letter came. A job offer for $35,000 per month, permanent position. The letter was signed by the captain in flowing red script. I tore it into pieces, but sometimes late at night, I hear whispers through our apartment's intercom. And occasionally, I find drops of blood on our bathroom floor. I know what it means. The Neptune's crown isn't finished with me. But throwing away that business card feels like admitting I survived something that shouldn't exist. And sometimes, when normal life feels overwhelming, I wonder if I should have stayed.